Errol Flynn was once Hollywood's favorite hero, the daring adventurer who lit up the silver screen with his charm. But away from the spotlight, his life was filled with chaos, scandal, and disturbing rumors that would later stain his name. For years, fans saw him as the perfect leading man. Behind the scenes, he became one of Hollywood's most controversial figures. Here's how Errol Flynn went from screen idol to one of the most feared names in old Hollywood history. Flynn's rebellious youth. Errol Leslie Thompson Flynn was born on June 20th, 1909, in Hobart, Tasmania, to a respectable professor father and an adventurous mother. From an early age, however, young Errol proved to be rebellious and unruly. He attended some of the finest schools in Australia and England, only to be expelled from virtually all of them for fighting, truancy, or other mischief. One school in Sydney kicked him out after an alleged affair with an older female staff member came to light, according to Flynn's own later recollections. By his late teens, Flynn had developed a reputation as a troublemaker who rejected authority and convention at every turn. Desiring adventure over academics, Flynn left formal education behind around 1926 and set out to make his own way. He worked briefly as a shipping clerk in Sydney and tried his hand at respectable jobs, but his restless nature kept getting him into trouble. Before long, the lure of quick fortune led him north to the wild frontier of Papua New Guinea. There, in his late teens and early 20s, Flynn lived a rough, lawless life that he later claimed shaped his amoral character. He worked as a copra plantation overseer, a gold prospector, a fisherman, and even a self-described recruiter of indigenous labor, essentially participating in the coercive indentured servitude practices of the colonial era. Flynn would candidly admit to witnessing and taking part in the brutalities of colonialism, saying he bumped and bumbling about the jungle chasing wealth with little regard for rules. During these New Guinea years, Flynn's escapades grew increasingly dangerous and reckless. He boasted of living through tribal ambushes, deadly diseases, and run-ins with the law. In one notorious episode, which has never been fully verified by official records, Flynn claimed he was charged with murder after shooting a man during a skirmish with local tribesmen. According to his later memoir, he managed to convince a colonial court it was self-defense and walked free. "It was the one episode of trouble in my life that didn't involve women," Flynn quipped of this murder trial, "and there'd be plenty of those to come." Whether embellished or true, such stories hint at the lawless, devil-may-care life Flynn led before Hollywood ever knew his name. By his early 20s, he had already packed a lifetime of adventure and moral compromise into his resume, setting the stage for the chaotic fame to follow. Stardom and Hollywood heroism. In 1933, Errol Flynn's unlikely journey to Hollywood began with a stroke of fate. A film producer traveling in the South Pacific was charmed by the tall, ruggedly handsome young Flynn and cast him as mutineer Fletcher Christian in an Australian film, In the Wake of the Bounty. The low-budget 1933 film was not a hit, but it gave Flynn a taste of acting and a ticket to Europe. He joined a repertory theater company in England, where his natural charisma soon landed him bit parts in British films. Warner Brothers took notice and in 1935 brought Flynn to California, a gamble that paid off spectacularly. When the studio's first choice for the lead in Captain Blood fell through, they handed the role to the unknown Flynn, and he shot to stardom overnight. Throughout the late 1930s, Flynn became the silver screen's foremost swashbuckler, typifying adventure and daring. With his athletic build, roguish grin, and effortless charm, he was typecast as the dashing hero in a string of period adventures and costume epics. He wielded swords and swung from ropes as Robin Hood, frontier vigilantes, sea captains, and soldiers, lending an air of cheerful bravado to each role. The Adventures of Robin Hood. 1938 was perhaps his most iconic film, a technicolor spectacle that made use of Flynn's fearless aura and became a defining classic of Hollywood's golden age. By 1940, he was starring in hit after hit, westerns like Dodge City, war dramas like Dive Bomber, and biographical films like Gentleman Jim, firmly cementing his status as one of the era's biggest box office draws. On screen, Flynn was the embodiment of gallantry, fighting injustice, and wooing maidens with a wink. Off-screen, Warner Brothers. Publicity machine carefully cultivated his image as a genial real-life daredevil, always ready with a witty remark or a charming anecdote. Yet, even at the height of his fame, hints of Flynn's troubled private life were emerging in Hollywood circles. Almost as soon as he arrived in Hollywood, he had developed a reputation as an irrepressible drinker, carouser, and womanizer, in the words of one biographer. He lived the high life at his estate, partying late into the night, sailing his yacht on wild excursions, and indulging every vice available in pre-war Tinseltown. In 1935, Flynn impulsively married French actress Lily Demita after a whirlwind romance, but their union was tempestuous from the start. The couple's vicious public arguments and Flynn's serial infidelities became an open secret in Hollywood. He had to have her, one account said of Flynn's obsession with Demita. Yet within months, they were fighting like cats and dogs and often lived apart. Behind the studio orchestrated publicity photos of a perfect couple. The marriage was a horror show of jealousy and ego, foreshadowing Flynn's inability to sustain stable relationships. By the early 1940s, Flynn was a global superstar, but his off-screen excesses were catching up with him. He was approaching his mid-30s, his youthful look still intact on film, but his name was increasingly appearing in gossip columns alongside words like brawl, binge, or scandal. Warner Brothers continued to cast him as the clean-cut hero fighting for good, but soon reality would deliver a scandal so explosive that it would forever shatter Errol Flynn's heroic image. Eruption of scandals. In late 1942, Errol Flynn became the central figure in one of Hollywood's most shocking scandals. On November 14, 1942, Los Angeles authorities charged Flynn with statutory rape, alleging that he had unlawful sexual intercourse with two underage girls aged 17. The news stunned America. The beloved star who played Robin Hood and Captain Blood was accused of heinous misconduct with minors. The two teens, Peggy Satterlee and Betty Hansen, claimed that on separate occasions that year, Flynn had seduced them, one aboard his yacht and one at a house party. In Satterlee's case, a complaint had initially been made after a 1941 yacht trip, but no charges were filed until a second incident with Hansen came to light. According to Hansen, then 17, she had met Flynn at a Hollywood party where heavy drinking ensued. She alleged that Flynn took her upstairs to clean up after she got sick and then raped her in a bedroom. When Hansen reported the encounter, the district attorney noticed similarities to Satterlee's past accusation and decided to prosecute Flynn on both counts simultaneously. The case quickly turned into a media circus. Flynn was at the peak of his career. In the prior decade, he had made 26 films and was the very image of a swashbuckling leading man. The idea that this matinee idol could be a sexual predator both titillated and horrified the public. Newspapers bannered the story, fans swarmed the courthouse, and gossip columnists had a field day. Flynn, for his part, arrogantly maintained his innocence and seemed to treat the serious charges almost like another starring role. He quipped to reporters, "Who approaches a prospective sweetheart asking her to whip out her birth certificate?" implying that if he slept with underage girls, it was only because he hadn't checked their age. This glib attitude did little to dampen the frenzy. At one pre-trial hearing, crowds of curious onlookers gathered outside and even trampled parts of Flynn's 11-acre estate, hoping for a glimpse of scandal or a stray autograph. The press dubbed it the rape trial of the century for Hollywood, and it exposed the sordid underbelly of the film colony's party culture. As one retrospective noted, the episode focused national attention on Hollywood's sexual mores in a way few scandals had before. It also introduced a new catchphrase into the American lexicon, but that would come later with the trial's outcome. The 1943 trial, Hollywood in the Dock. Errol Flynn's statutory rape trial began on January 11, 1943, and for the next 4 weeks, the nation was riveted by the courtroom drama. The prosecution laid out its case. Flynn, using his movie star charm, had preyed upon two adolescent girls. Peggy Satterlee, just 15 at the time of the alleged incident, testified that during a 1941 sailing trip to Catalina Island on Flynn's yacht, the actor had flirtatiously nicknamed her JB, short for jailbait, and SQQ, San Quentin Quail, clear acknowledgments that he knew she was underage. Satterlee described in detail how Flynn allegedly snuck into her cabin and had sexual intercourse with her not once but twice during the voyage. She admitted she did not resist the first encounter, but claimed she fought him off during the second. On the stand, Satterlee even recalled a romantic touch. Flynn, she said, had pointed out the beautiful full moon through the porthole just before assaulting her, a detail the prosecution would attempt to corroborate scientifically. The second accuser, Betty Hansen, took the stand about her encounter at a house party in September 1942. She testified that 33-year-old Flynn plied her with champagne until she was sick, then took her upstairs on the pretext of helping her, where he allegedly seduced her in a bedroom while she was impaired. Hanson's credibility, however, quickly came under attack. Under cross-examination by Flynn's superstar defense attorney, Jerry Geisler, Hanson became flustered and confused in her testimony, admitting that she had been involved in unrelated legal trouble with her boyfriend around that time. Geisler suggested Hanson might be accusing Flynn to gain leniency in her own case, planting seeds of doubt about her motives. In Satterley's cross-examination, Geisler similarly went on the offensive. He got Satterley to acknowledge that she habitually lied about her age and that she had been sexually intimate with other men before something taboo in that era for a young unmarried woman. It also emerged that Satterley had undergone an illegal abortion following one of those prior relations. The defense leveraged these revelations to paint Satterley as an unreliable witness of questionable character, a strategy typical of the time, though deeply unfair by modern standards. Flynn himself took the stand in his own defense, vehemently denying every accusation. With a mix of Hollywood charm and indignation, he testified that he never touched either girl and never made the crude jailbait jokes they attributed to him. Flynn claimed he had no romantic involvement whatsoever. He hadn't even been alone with Hanson after she fell ill, and on the yacht he insisted he never entered Satterley's cabin, nor invited her to his. His performance on the stand was dramatic and effective. Spectators in the packed courtroom, mostly women, swooned, and some openly wept as Flynn spoke, while a few men heckled in disbelief. Outside the courthouse, frenzied fans waited for a glimpse of the star each day, underscoring how his public persona still held powerful sway, even amid the ugliest allegations. In a memorable twist, the prosecution brought in an astronomer to prove Satterley's tale about the moonlight on the yacht. The expert testified that on the night in question, a full moon would indeed have been visible through a porthole on Flynn's boat, seemingly confirming her account. But Geisler deftly dismantled this evidence. Under cross-exam, the astronomer admitted that given the yacht's likely course, the moon could not have been seen from Flynn's cabin at all. This moment, essentially a battle of romance versus physics, elicited chuckles in court and dealt a blow to Satterley's story. The trial's aftermath was a study in contradictions. Legally, Flynn was cleared. Culturally, his bad boy image strangely grew even larger. During the trial, one of the more salacious details, Peggy Satterley's claim that Flynn kept his boots on during sex, coincidentally echoed the title of his new film, They Died with Their Boots On, providing ample fodder for jokes. Flynn became the target of bawdy humor and also a perverse sort of admiration. Young men bragged that they were in like Flynn, a bawdy new slang term meaning to have one's sexual advances accepted or to get out of trouble easily. The catchphrase, "in like Flynn," entered American pop culture as a direct result of the trial's notoriety. Meanwhile, throngs of adoring women continued to pursue him, banging on the doors of his estate like hail on a roof, as one account described it. Flynn's roguish reputation was now cemented. He was the lovable scoundrel who had beaten the rap. However, not everyone was cheering. The trial had undeniably tarnished his public image in a more serious way. Many Americans, especially more conservative audiences, were disillusioned to learn of the debauchery and entitlement that the case revealed. Warner Brothers quietly began reducing the prominence of Flynn's roles after 1943, sensing that the glossy shine on their leading man had been irrevocably dulled. The scandal had shown the world a darker side of Hollywood excess, and Errol Flynn, acquittal or not, would never fully escape the shadow of those allegations. A Vulgar autobiography. In 1959, a few months after Flynn's death, the public got to read the fallen star's side of the story, in his own unfiltered words. Flynn's autobiography, ominously titled My Wicked, Wicked Ways, hit bookshelves and immediately caused a sensation. The memoir was outrageously candid about his lifetime of misdeeds, to the point of gleeful self-incrimination. In its pages, Flynn bragged of decadent exploits that went far beyond the trial. From his earliest childhood sins, he recounts being caught playing doctor with a neighborhood girl at age 7 and promptly getting a beating to his wild Hollywood parties. The book spared no embarrassing detail. Flynn wrote of biting off sheep testicles on a dare as a farm boy, smoking marijuana with artist Diego Rivera, learning to drink odorless vodka on movie sets, and even using cocaine on the tip of his penis as a peculiar bedroom stimulant. "I have been in rebellion against God and government ever since I can remember," Flynn declared, and the stories in My Wicked, Wicked Ways supported that statement. The autobiography shocked even Flynn's friends with its brazen vulgarity. Playwright Noel Coward remarked that the book's outspokenness curdles the blood, calling it a wealth of unnecessary vulgarity coming straight from Flynn's pen. Indeed, Flynn wrote about his sexual conquests and vices with a shameless, often flippant tone. He addressed the 1943 rape trial head-on, admitting that he had a sexual encounter with Peggy Satterley, framing it as consensual while claiming to barely know Betty Hansen. Yet even as he professed innocence under the law, Flynn remained disturbingly glib about the ordeal. "I might have been guilty as hell under the law, that is," he wrote, insisting the underage girls had asked for it and portraying himself as the victim of overly strict statutes. This lack of remorse reinforced the worst impressions of his character. Elsewhere in the memoir, Flynn mused, "I am dangerous to be with because since I live dangerously, others are subject to the danger that I expose myself to. They, more likely than I, will get hurt." It was a chilling acknowledgement of the collateral damage he caused to those around him. Critics of the day were divided on my wicked, wicked ways. Some found it compelling in a lurid way. A final performance by Flynn, playing himself as the charming devil. Others were appalled by his utter lack of filter or contrition. Over time, the memoir gained a cult status as one of the most uninhibited celebrity autobiographies ever published. Modern historians note that while the book is remarkably candid, it is also often wildly inaccurate, with Flynn exaggerating or outright fabricating stories for effect. For example, his dramatic New Guinea murder trial story has never been corroborated by any records, casting doubt on Flynn's truthfulness. Nevertheless, the autobiography served to mythologize Flynn's persona as Hollywood's premier bad boy. In naming his life story Wicked, Flynn seemed to revel in his own infamy. The book's legacy today is mixed. It's praised as utterly absorbing in its storytelling, yet undeniably problematic in its glorification of depravity. Above all, My Wicked, Wicked Ways solidified Errol Flynn's image in his own words as a man who lived and died by his own rules, unabashed by the wreckage left in his wake. The hero's mask versus the man's true face. Errol Flynn's public persona and private reality could not have been more different. On the silver screen, he was forever the chivalrous hero, the laughing, courageous rogue who saved the day and then bowed gallantly to the lady. But behind closed doors, Flynn's life descended into chaos, excess, and tragedy. The 1943 trial was a turning point. Although he resumed acting afterward, his golden boy image was irreparably cracked. Parents now hesitated before letting their children idolize Errol Flynn. He was still popular, but a whiff of scandal trailed him. Warner Brothers stuck with him through the mid-1940s, but the roles shifted to match his aging appearance and tarnished rep. Flynn's self-indulgent lifestyle, heavy drinking, chain smoking, and drug use began to visibly take a toll. By the late 1940s, on screen he appeared haggard, distracted, and far older than his years, as one account noted bluntly. His once athletic physique softened, his famous face gained lines and a perpetual weary look. Off-screen, matters were worse. Flynn had squandered a fortune on failed business ventures, extravagant living, and costly divorces. In 1949, he sold his lavish Mulholland Drive estate, scene of so many wild parties, and drifted to Europe, ostensibly to revive his career, but really to escape mounting tax troubles and personal disarray. Publicly, Flynn tried to maintain a devil-may-care bravado. Privately, he grew bitter and paranoid about his fading star. "I felt used," he wrote of this period, complaining that the studio, the press, and society had all exploited him for their own gain. "Used by the studio, used to make money, used by the press for fun," he grumbled, casting himself as a chalk stick worn down to nothing. This self-pity rang a bit hollow, given how much he had indulged in Hollywood's perks. In truth, Flynn was the architect of many of his own misfortunes. His alcohol abuse in particular was catching up with him physically and professionally. Directors noticed he could no longer remember lines or maintain his focus on set. In 1950, Flynn's third marriage to young actress Patrice Wymore quickly fell into shambles due to his chronic drinking and infidelity. By 1952, they were separated, and Flynn was essentially adrift, living on his yacht or in cheap hotels, taking whatever film work he could get. He began accepting roles parodying his own decline, playing drunks and washed-up has-beens, which he did to great acclaim in films like The Sun Also Rises, 1957, and Too Much, Too Soon, 1958. Critics dryly observed that Flynn was brilliant in these parts because he was not acting at all, simply channeling his genuine ruin. Perhaps the starkest contrast between Flynn's public and private selves was in his relationships with others. On screen, he was the consummate charming companion and romantic lead. Off-screen, those closest to him often suffered. All three of his marriages were marred by infidelity and acrimony. His first wife, Lily Demita, allegedly shot him in the foot during one of their fights, a story Flynn later laughed off. His second wife, Nora Eddington, was just 18 when she married the 35-year-old Flynn during his rape trial saga. She endured his drinking and womanizing until she too left him in 1949. Flynn had 4 children, but was by most accounts a distant father. In the 1950s, as his life unraveled, he saw very little of his kids, 2 daughters from his second marriage, and a son, Sean Flynn, from his first. Instead, Flynn kept company with sycophants and enablers who joined his binges. By 1957, Flynn had exiled himself to a 7-acre estate in Jamaica, where he spent his days sailing, drinking, and brooding far from the Hollywood spotlight. His only constant companion in those final years was a teenager named Beverly Aidland, an aspiring actress whom Flynn controversially began dating when she was just 15 years old. He was in his late 40s. The relationship, though kept semi-secret at the time, epitomized the troubling pattern of Flynn's private life. Even after nearly going to prison for statutory rape, he was undeterred in pursuing very young women. In October 1959, at age 50, Flynn died suddenly of a heart attack in Vancouver, Canada. Decades of hard living had ravaged his body. The coroner's report noted cirrhosis of the liver, an enlarged heart, and failing organs, all conditions of a much older man. When news of his death broke, many were saddened, but few were shocked. Flynn had long been seen as a shadow of his former self, to use his own words. Publicly, obituaries remembered him as the dashing Hollywood icon. Privately, those who knew him well understood that Errol Flynn died as he had lived, restless, reckless, and ultimately alone. His life was a classic cautionary tale, the cheerful hero loved by millions who couldn't conquer his own demons when the cameras stopped rolling. Posthumous revelations and dark allegations. If Errol Flynn thought death would end the gossip and scandal, he was mistaken. In the decades after 1959, Flynn's already checkered legacy was further clouded by new allegations, some credible, some wildly speculative. Perhaps the most incendiary claim came in 1980, when author Charles Hyam published a sensational Flynn biography titled Errol Flynn, The Untold Story. In it, Hyam dropped a bombshell. He accused Errol Flynn of having been a Nazi spy during World War II, covertly aiding Hitler's regime while publicly serving as Hollywood's patriotic hero. Hyam's book asserted that Flynn harbored pro-Nazi sympathies, met with Nazi agents in Spain during the Spanish Civil War, and passed information to the German intelligence, effectively branding Flynn a traitor to the country that had given him fame. The book also floated lurid allegations about Flynn's sexuality, claiming he was secretly bisexual and had slept with underage boys procured in Mexico. These shocking assertions grabbed headlines and threatened to transform Flynn's image from debauched rogue into something far more sinister. However, as other historians soon pointed out, Hyam's claims were largely unsupported by evidence. In the wake of the untold story, researchers dug into declassified government files in Flynn's personal archives trying to verify the espionage charges. What they found did not back up Hyam's narrative. Flynn had indeed been friendly with a man named Dr. Hermann Urban, an Austrian who turned out to be a Nazi agent, but scholars who interviewed Urban and reviewed wartime records concluded that Flynn himself was never a Nazi operative. One biographer, Tony Thomas, went so far as to title his 1983 book, Errol Flynn, The Spy Who Never Was, refuting Hyam point by point. Flynn's daughters also filed a defamation lawsuit against Hyam, though it was dismissed, since the dead cannot be legally libeled. As for the allegations of trysts with boys, Flynn's close friends vehemently denied it. "We certainly don't depict Flynn as a saint, but his romantic life didn't include other men," said William Donati, who co-authored a book with Flynn's longtime stuntman and friend Buster Wiles. Wiles and Donati devoted a section of their 1988 memoir to debunking the Hyam controversies, and they found no credible evidence that Flynn was anything more than what he appeared, a womanizing drunk, yes, but not a Nazi spy. Hyam's response was defiant. He insisted his research was thorough and the case closed in his favor. Yet today, mainstream historians regard the Nazi collaborator theory as unproven and likely false. The episode nonetheless added a chilling new chapter to Flynn's lore. forcing fans to grapple with the possibility, however remote, that the screen's Robin Hood might have harbored real-life fascist sympathies. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy stories like this, please like, subscribe, and tell us who we should cover next.